You're listening to the Careers BU podcast, a podcast aimed at Bournemouth University students and graduates. Each episode, we talk to employers, alumni and professionals all about their career journey, what employers are looking for, and help you explore the opportunities that are available to you. Hello and welcome to this podcast. I'm Amanda Fripp, Careers Consultant at BU. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr Tina Barton, an Honorary Fellow and Board Member of the Institute of Clinical Research. With over 45 years of experience in clinical development and research, Tina is a passionate advocate for this sector. Today, we'll be discussing some of the common misconceptions about clinical research, the wide range of career opportunities available, both clinical and non-clinical, and Tina's top tips for getting started in the field. Hi Tina, welcome to the podcast.
Amanda, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me this morning.
You're welcome. It's great to have you here. Can you just introduce yourself and your role, please?
Absolutely. So my name's Dr Tina Barton. I'm currently primarily wearing two hats. So I'm Chief Operating Officer of a small company, my own company with a colleague called Emerging Markets Quality Trials, EMQT, and we're focused on trying to get commercial clinical trials into sub-Saharan Africa.
Oh, wow.
So that's my day job, but I'm also an honorary fellow of the Institute of Clinical Research and also sit on the board as one of the directors. And my key responsibility for ICR currently is training and education. Brilliant.
Okay. So we're going to be talking about careers in clinical research, and it's something that you seem, when I've spoken to you before, you're really passionate about. So you've been working in this industry for a long time, have you?
Yes, I have a very long time. And I think it's an amazing industry, and clinical research is something people don't know very much about. It's basically where we take potential molecules and medical devices and convert them from that, hopefully, into a medicine or a treatment that patients can benefit from. It starts with a lot of work that's lab-based, no people involved in that in terms of the research itself. And then we move into a clinical phase, which is when you do start doing your testing on volunteers. First of all, healthy volunteers that have no medical issues, and then the patient volunteers for the disease that you're studying. The thing to understand about clinical research is that 99 of these potential treatments fail during the process because it's very rigorous, extremely rigorous. But that 1 in 100 has real impact because we're now bringing the miracle of new medicines and treatments to patients. And that's what I love about clinical research, and that's why I'm still doing it after all these years, when theoretically I could have retired, but I just can't leave it alone right now.
Brilliant. Okay. And it's, clinical research is something that actually affects all of us because we all take medicines. Well, pretty much most of us will take medicines at some point, or we're impacted because we might have family members or ourselves that have going through treatment. And all that is because of clinical research, isn't it? It's there because the research has to take place.
Yes, absolutely it is. And I'm very thrilled, actually, is the word, to hear and see now the new government-backed NHS initiative be part of research. Anyone that's had the television on or their radio on in recent weeks will have heard about it. Finally, clinical research is becoming mainstream. And the more we get involved, the more everyone's going to benefit in terms of treatments for patients, not just here in the UK, but around the world.
So what's your background been like? You've got a doctorate.
Yeah.
So what's your journey?
Yeah, wow, what a journey I've had. I had no idea about clinical research when I first started. I took an academic research appointment at University College Hospital in the Department of Surgery. I was wearing a white coat. I was working at the bench. I was collecting various samples and things from patients within the department and doing the analysis and the research. I got bored, so I did a part-time PhD, like you might.
Like you do.
Yeah, as you do. And my study was on the role of cholesterol in colon cancer. Oncology was a big part of the department's research efforts, so that was my topic, and I found it really fascinating. Alongside that, I was grant funded. Like many academic researchers, you have to spend a lot of time applying for grants. So I was getting grants at the time from people like Glaxo and Astra, as they were then. I was actually doing some really early volunteer work on omeprazole, which we all know now as Nexium. So that was its first days. A CRA used to come in and check what I was doing. So, clinical research associate, and more about those later. So, I was talking to this guy, and he basically told me all about his job. And I'm like, oh, so you get paid a salary, no grant applications, you get a company car, and you drive around talking to people doing scientific research. Sounds like a good job to me. So as Prof said at the time, I'm jumping ship to the dark side. And I joined the pharmaceutical industry as a CRA, which is a clinical research associate. From there, I just progressed. I loved it. I had a lot of experiences around the UK. I went across Europe. It became more and more global. So I progressed from a CRA to a senior CRA, then to a leader of a team of CRAs. Then I became a project manager. I also had a role as the European head of data management, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Then I went on to global roles as a project director overseeing large global clinical studies, and then focusing on work with single clients. And finally, in my commercial life, VP of strategic client account, which was a huge role. But now I decided to step away from corporate, and I'm now Chief Operating Officer of our own company. Through that journey, one thing I would like to stress is I've been made redundant 4 times.
Wow.
And every time it's led to something better. So I know there are a lot of people out there right now that may be facing that through their careers. And I would say, don't fear it. As one door closes, another door will always open. And certainly for me, it, in some cases, propelled my career to different heights.
Yeah, brilliant. That's quite good advice. I've seen that happen a lot too, as well. Okay, so your experience is quite vast, and it sounds incredibly interesting. So, what do you find in terms of what people perceive as clinical research and the misconceptions around a career or the work in clinical research? What do you feel like the main misconceptions are?
There are a few. I think we all know that the public in general say drugs are too expensive. The NHS says we can't afford them, patients can't get access to them. And so there's this general feeling that drugs are just too expensive and the pharma companies are making massive profits. But let me just tell you one thing. To bring a single drug to market, because remember, only 1 out of 100 make it, it costs many billions of dollars. Billions.
Wow.
I ran a large program of work, nearly 15 years ago now, for a major pharma company. We had 33 projects we were running. Some of them were quite small, some of them were huge global programs, with 5 or 6 different drugs that we were testing at the time. And the portfolio of work I was running for them was worth almost $500,000.
Wow. So it's
Massive, expensive thing to get a drug to market. You truly are looking at billions of dollars. And so therefore, in order to have that money to develop the next drug or the next treatment, pharma companies, when they get something to market, they have to make a degree of profit on it. So yes, they are very expensive, but I don't think they're unjustifiably expensive. We've done the easy things. So those quick, easy things that we did back in the day, finding digitalis for hypertension from foxgloves and other such things. We've done the easy things. Now we're left with the hard things. That's expensive. I think the other misconception is that people are used as guinea pigs. That's another one I've heard a lot. But we are testing a research hypothesis. It's an experiment. And any experiment has an unknown outcome. So in a way, we're all guinea pigs. Even if you take a medicine that you're prescribed by your doctor, in a way, you're a guinea pig, because if you've never had that medicine before, you don't know what the impact for you is going to be. But because the doctor's prescribed it, we trustingly believe it will be safe and effective. And in most cases, that's absolutely true. So yes, we're all being used as guinea pigs when we give our consent to get involved in trials, but it's a very emotive term. We're basically volunteers testing a research hypothesis to bring benefit to patients if it works.
So I guess there's lots of ethical guidelines around that and processes. You're not just, there's a lot of systems around it to keep people as safe as possible.
Absolutely, you're right there, because there are many rules and regulations and legalities we have to go through. Every study has to be given approval by the government in the country that you're doing those clinical studies. You have to get ethical approval from a designated legal ethics committee for that country. And you also have to get approval from the institute where you're planning to do your trial, that it's sound and effective and there's no unnecessarily inducement involved. So yes, very much a highly regulated business. So another misconception is that you'll be in a lab in a white coat. Most of the roles in pharma, particularly in clinical research, you're not wearing a white coat. Mm-hmm. If you're working at a clinical research site within a hospital, you might be wearing a white coat because you may be a doctor or working as a co-investigator alongside the medical team. You may be in pharmacy, so you might be wearing a white coat. But in general, across the clinical research industry, you won't be wearing a white coat. I also think that, as I've already mentioned, this new NHS government support to be a part of research is going to be very beneficial for helping allay some of these misconceptions as well.
Quite a few different types of misconceptions, which might, I guess, maybe stop people from thinking it's the industry for them. So that's kind of good to break down some of those myths. So what are the main roles within clinical research? Let's talk about that, the different types of roles. I mean, I'm sure there's loads, but let's start with what are the main ones?
There are so many roles. So basically, you've got the people running the research, which is the group called the sponsor. So that's normally the pharma company in big pharma research clinical trials, just taking that sort of overall generic situation. They sometimes will subcontract the work to what we call a clinical research organisation, CRO, or contract research organisation, where they act as the sponsor on the pharma company's behalf. And then you've got the hospitals, the sites that are running the studies. So there's lots of different roles. If you're at the site, you might be a study coordinator, or you might be doing the data entry from the results that are happening with those patients. You might be a clinical trial pharmacist at a site. You could be a research nurse at a site. So you've got specific roles if you want to work more closely with the patients at a hospital or clinic site. Then if you go back to the pharma company or a CRO, then you've got lots of different roles in the administrative work. Clinical trial administrator is a real starter role. A junior CRA is another starter role, clinical research associate. We have lots and lots of records that we have to maintain. It's, as I said, highly regulated, so we have to basically record everything we do. So there's a lot of junior roles in records management. We have to manage the data very strictly. Data integrity is one of the two key requirements of all clinical research. So that department has lots of different roles in it. And starting as a data management assistant is another entry role. Safety is critical in everything we do. Okay. And so we have a key department within pharma companies called pharmacovigilance, which is all about reporting and collecting all the information on safety. So that department will have junior assistants that help support their work. So again, all these different departments have their own entry-level roles. Statistics is another one. Medical writing is another one. Regulatory affairs is another one. They're the ones that deal with all the requirements of the government and sending in all the reports that we have to send in. So there's many, many different roles and many, many opportunities for people looking to start their career in clinical research.
And it sounds like there's quite a lot of like the actual clinical roles, but also that's slightly more non-clinical. So you talk about data, administrative, it sounds like legal.
Yeah, they're all within the remit of doing the clinical trials and the clinical research, but there are many, many different roles across that spectrum. There are also lots of different roles that are not in the direct clinical research space within pharma. And I know we're going to talk about the qualifications that you need to get into it, but if you're not a biomedical or bioscience graduate or don't have any healthcare experience in your background, then there are still loads of different roles within our industry for you. You could be interested in going into IT, for example. Everything we do is based on technology and amazing computer systems that hold all of our data and keep everything safe. So there are a lot of roles in that case. There's sales, there's marketing, there's HR, of course, there's finance. All of our products are made in a factory. Pharmaceutical manufacture is another huge, great industry where we need engineers or designers. There is literally something for everyone in this industry.
That's interesting. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of the university students coming from BU and the different types of degrees that they've got and how they could fit in to some of those roles. So what kind of background or qualifications do you need to start a career in clinical research?
If you want to get directly into clinical research, you generally have to have some life science or healthcare related qualifications. So you may have got a life science degree. You may have decided to go down the pharmacy road or the nursing role. You may be qualifying as into physiotherapy or some kind of data science. And again, IT, as I already mentioned. Any of those things, stats, any of those areas would give you a direct opportunity to get into clinical research.
Brilliant. So some of the life sciences, for the more scientific side of the role, and like you're saying, nursing. So maybe students who've studied nursing at university or other or similar healthcare professions, and maybe decided they don't want to go and work in the typical route of a nurse. They want to move that into clinical research, and they can do that, can they?
Yeah, absolutely they can. Or they might decide, well, I'll go and give nursing a go, but I don't really want to do it long term. They get a few months experience under their belt and then maybe become a research nurse.
And then, we've got graduates from like masters in data science and digital health. What else have we got? Management, business, IT, computing. So all of those types of graduates could potentially build a career in certain areas within this sector.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a role for all of those people. It's just making sure that you're clear about what it is you think you can do and what you want to do and where you think you might want to do something in the future. So you may, I'm working with someone currently who's got a very senior role in one of the organisations I'm working with, who basically qualified as a lawyer, but is now head of a clinical trials unit.
I can imagine law is another really interesting subject that could go into this, fit into it quite well. Yeah. In terms of, and actually you've kind of, as you were talking, some of this is, I think you've already kind of touched on, but in terms of skills then, what skills are important within this sector?
Yeah, Amanda, that's a really good question because it is all about your skills and so many skills are transferable. For some of the roles, many of the roles actually, attention to detail is critical. We're highly regulated, so everything's got to be properly planned, implemented and documented. And there are lots of rules and regulations that we have to follow. So having that attention to detail, making sure that everything is done the way it needs to be done, and followed up appropriately is really important. In many of the roles, you have to get on with a wide variety of interdisciplinary teams. So you need to have good people interaction skills and managing your time, because some of the roles are very independent. So managing your own time and being proactive and productive without having a manager checking what you're doing all the time is another key skill, I think. There's a lot of communication with a lot of different people. So I think, it's all those general things that will really help you. And then bringing your science to the fore. And I always say to students, be confident. Recognize you don't know everything, but then nobody around you does either. And they know that you're new, but you'll bring a different perspective. And that's worth hearing about. So be prepared to speak up and be confident.
I think, and like you mentioned, they're so transferable, these skills, that they can be developed in so many different ways. And you also talked before about, data. So I guess, if you haven't come from like a data science background, maybe you've come from a life science background, but actually having a good grasp of data analytics, is that useful too?
Absolutely. A lot of the data management roles within the industry, people fill them. They haven't come from a data science background. They've come from a life science background or a computer science background. So, there's many different ways you can end up in a particular route. So one of my colleagues that I've worked with a lot over the years, she started did her degree in neurology, did a master's in neurology, and then joined the industry as a junior data manager and stayed in data management for many years. Then she became a data project manager, so managing the data side of the project for large global trials. And then she decided, well, actually enjoy project management. So then she moved into general project management, where she was overseeing a whole project and all the different activities within it. And now she's working as a strategic planning advisor at another organisation, working on how do we manage this trial? How do we plan to do it, to deliver it? So you can see how roles can really change depending on what you decide you want to do as your career progresses. So that's a very different route to the one I took, where I started also in academic research, but then moved into the more clinical side as a CRA, and then to a project manager, then did some data management, and then into the more strategic side. So our paths have crossed, but they've been quite different.
And in terms of what current students maybe could be doing, if they're listening to this and thinking, I wouldn't mind getting into clinical research, and maybe they're a current student or maybe a recent grad, are there any tips or advice that you think would be useful for them to start working on, or what could they be doing now to get themselves ready?
Yeah, that's really important, I think. Okay, so when you're applying for jobs, all the usual routes obviously apply. But my advice would be, don't wait for an opportunity to come up wherever you're looking, on whatever website you're looking. Be proactive. Get some relevant experience. Look at doing an internship or just volunteer in something that's relevant. Make sure you've got a LinkedIn presence, because our industry, most people that work in our industry are on LinkedIn. And it's also good to communicate with people that are part of that and have taken that initiative. And if you see a post that interests you from someone else in this business, comment on it, get involved, and be prepared to cold call people as well. You may think, I'd really like to work for, I don't know, a pharma company that you've seen presenting something on LinkedIn, you've read about it or something, and you think, I'd really like to work for them. That's right up my street, what they're doing. Ring them, call their HR team, call their clinical ops team, make a nuisance of yourself. Yes, the squeaky wheel always gets the oil. But apart from anything else, they may say, I'm really sorry, we don't have anything for you at the moment. But they'll remember your name. So demonstrate that enthusiasm and get all the help you can. And it's for that reason that ICR set up our new membership level for early careers clinical researchers. So this is for people that have never worked in the business, would like to work in the business. They may be a student, they may be transferring from another career, but basically they want to get involved, they want to be part of clinical research, they want to build a career in that area. And we've started offering that membership at just £10 a year. It's an opportunity to get involved. The Institute of Clinical Research is a professional body for all those working in clinical research. We're not an employer, we're not a recruiter. We're all about developing professionals, sharing knowledge and raising standards. And we want to do that with the whole community. And I think there's room for everyone. You just have to make yourself heard.
Yeah. And I think that's, £10 a year to join a membership. That's a very small amount. And that could be potentially
2 pints a beer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at some places, wow, yeah, it's so expensive alcohol now. But, that's such a small investment, which could make quite a big impact.
It gives you the chance to build a network, to get to know some of the things that's going on in our industry, maybe to meet some of the people. You do have the opportunity to attend some of the membership activities for free, but not all of them. The training discounts that we give are not applicable because they're normally aimed at people that are in the industry already anyway. But yeah, it's great to get involved and become part of the network. If you really think this is a career for you, then the sooner you get involved, the sooner you'll get a job that you're looking for.
Yeah, and that would be really great if somebody goes for an interview and you can say, you're a member of the Institute of Clinical Research and what you've gained from that, and it really shows that interest and that you've got that drive for that sector. So, okay, and I'll put the link to your website in the show notes. So you mentioned about kind of cold calling, trying to find where these opportunities might be. So what types of organisations could students or graduates target? Now, I know you've mentioned already a few, but can we just kind of recap the types of employers?
Yeah, so obviously pharma companies, but they're huge and it's difficult to know, but you've got to start somewhere. These commercial contract research organisations, CROs, they also have websites that often will say, if you're interested in a career. There are clinical research units at hospital sites around the country. So have a look at those and see if the big trust near you has got one. And maybe they're looking for help and have roles. I know that a couple that I'm working with, they're really struggling to get people in the door. So I'm sure they'd be interested in anyone that showed enthusiasm for this area. There's also private clinical research organisations that act as sites. So have a look at some of those as well. And then there's a whole myriad of what we call third-party vendors. And they're basically all the organisations that supply supporting tools or resources to the pharma industry. So a big one is those companies that specialise in distributing clinical trial supplies. So if you're running a big clinical trial and you've got 40 sites in the UK and 20 sites in Germany and 10 sites in France, etc., 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 someone's got to make sure that the drug that the patients need get to them when they need it. And it's got to be well managed. Because it's not licensed, you've got to be able to know where every single tablet is at all times. So it has to be very closely tracked and monitored. And so there are whole organisations now that support the clinical research industry with drug distribution and packaging of clinical trial supplies. So maybe that's another interesting area for people as well.
Yeah, so quite wide-ranging. And again, you've kind of mentioned a couple of job titles, but for maybe that student or graduate wanting to go in it, what could they be searching for in terms of the actual job titles that could be that first step in?
Okay, so data manager, clinical research associate, clinical research administrator, or clinical trial administrator is a more common one for that. Medical writing assistant. So just look at those different functions and just look for the lower level jobs, basically.
Yeah, kind of the administrators, assistants, associates, those types of job titles.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. And even if you're coming from another career and moving into clinical research for the first time, you have to just recognise that you may be expected to take a step back. So you may have been a team manager at whatever company it is that's relevant, managing lots of data in a different setting, but the chances are in this industry, they won't give you a management role as the first port of call into our business. So you have to think about that as well. But there is something for everyone, and it's certainly worth getting involved.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, that's been really interesting. Any final tips? Anything else you feel like would be really great to part to students or grads or anyone really?
Yeah. So from my perspective, it's all about, as I've already said a couple of times already, you need to be proactive and be confident. Build your own network. Join ICR. Get connected. But most importantly, don't give up, because failure is just one step towards success. Because at the end of the day, you could be part of something amazing professionally, personally, because you're building your career and your future, and you'll have impact because you'll bring new medicines to patients globally. And what's not to like about that? So the other thing I would say is, if I look at myself, what do I say to myself, which is why I'm in this job still? 3 things. I want to be passionate. I ask why a lot. And also, I dare to be different. Don't accept the norm just because that's what's always been done. Dare to be different.
Brilliant. I love that. That's a really great few bits of advice to end on. And it sounds like this is a job where everyone involved is making a difference.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter if you're the person that is just entering a small amount of data at a site, or you're the person doing that final reporting, or the person sending safety updates to the regulators. Every piece of that has to happen for a new medicine to be safe and effective to come to market. So everyone has impact.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, on that note, thank you so much for all your information and insight into this sector. I think it isn't something that, when I speak to students or young people when I worked in schools, it wasn't an industry that a lot of people would necessarily think about. So I think it's really great the work you guys are doing at the ICR to really encourage people to think about this type of sector. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Amanda, it's been a pleasure. As you could probably tell, I'm very passionate about it. I've had a blast, and I want other people to have that same opportunity.
Thank you for listening today. Please remember to subscribe and follow so you can keep up to date with all new episodes.